People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
And you're going to make that happen by blowing up a building?
The building is a symbol, as is the act of destroying it. Symbols are given power by people. Alone, a symbol is meaningless, but with enough people, blowing up a building can change the world.
I wish I believed that was possible. But every time I've seen this world change, it's always been for the worse.
Wow, you weren't kidding about being fascinated by John Stuart Mill. This is a serious stack of stuff on the guy. Looks like we're diving into the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and even some excerpts from On Liberty. You really want to get into this, huh?
It seems so. And trust me, Mill's a thinker who rewards a deep dive. Did you know even math got him going?
Okay, now that's a side of Mill I haven't pictured before. Philosophy, liberty, sure, but math. What's the story there?
Well, to understand that, we got to start with Mill's bedrock. This idea of naturalism. It sounds simple, but he took it further than most.
All right, let's unpack this naturalism thing. What made Mill's take so different?
Mill was basically saying, look, humans are part of nature, full stop. No divine downloads, no special sauce in our brains. We operate by the same rules as everything else. And that's huge EE for how we gain knowledge, because it means there are no shortcuts.
Hold on, so you're saying all those gut feelings people rely on, those aren't some special intuition?
Exactly. Mill was big on this idea called associationism. He believed every thought we have, even those aha moments, are built from our experiences and how we connect them. Like, imagine you've only ever seen white swans.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this.
Right. You naturally assume all swans are white just based on your limited experience.
Yeah.
Mill uses that same idea to explain why we think space is infinite, even though we've never experienced infinity. We keep encountering more space beyond what we can see, so our brains just assume it goes on forever.
Remember, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder, treason, and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
So basically my childhood is messing with my worldview in ways I don't even realize. That's both fascinating and slightly terrifying.
It's more than just childhood, though. This affects how we do science, make decisions, everything. Mill was all about what he called inductive reasoning, which is basically how we should be thinking all the time. Yeah. Remember those science fair projects?
Oh, yeah, back in the day. My volcano was legendary.
Exactly. You observe something, come up with a hypothesis, test it out. That's inductive reasoning. Mill took this further with his canons of induction, which are like guidelines for making sure our thinking is sound.
Canons of induction? Sounds a bit intense for everyday use, doesn't it?
They sound fancy, but they're really intuitive. Let's take the method of difference, for example. Imagine your favorite plant is suddenly wilting. You realize the only difference from last week is that you forgot to water it. By isolating that difference, you figure out the cause. That's Mill's method in action.
So we should all be running little mental experiments all the time, like walking science fairs.
Well, maybe not literally, but the principle is the same. Question assumptions, look for evidence, refine your thinking. It's like having a built-in BS detector.
I like the sound of that. But if our minds are so shaped by experience, what happens when we encounter something that seems completely outside that realm, like, I don't know, math? Oh, that's got to be more than just swan-based associations, right? I like the sound of that.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But this is where Mill really throws a wrench in the gears. He says even something as abstract as calculus is ultimately rooted in, wait for it,
yeah,
our physical experience.
Whoa, hold up. Math coming from our experience. I thought math was about universal truths, eternal forms, all that jazz.
That was the prevailing view back then. But Mill wasn't buying it. He argued that numbers are just ways of describing properties of real things. And geometry, just an idealized version of the shapes and spatial relationships we see around us.
So is Mill saying we invented math or that we discovered it? That's a mind bender.
It's a bit of both, actually. We're discovering patterns that exist in the world, but we're using our minds to create the systems and symbols to represent those patterns. For Mill, math is a human creation, but it's grounded in something real.
Okay, that's starting to make sense. But here's another curveball for you. If our minds are natural, shaped by experience, and even our understanding of math comes from the physical world, doesn't that kind of trap us in a limited viewpoint? Like, are we stuck in a simulation of our own making? Asking for a friend?
That's a question philosophers have wrestled with for centuries. And Mill had a name for that trapped feeling, the relativity of knowledge. He argued that we can only ever access the world through our senses, our experiences. There's no peeking behind the curtain to see the universe as it truly is.
That's both humbling and a little disappointing. So we're stuck with this human-shaped view of reality.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. Think of it this way. You have a unique set of experiences, perspectives, ways of understanding the world. That's what makes you you. And while you might not have a God's eye view, you can still explore, learn, and refine your understanding of the world around you.
So instead of being bummed about what we don't know, we should focus on getting really good at observing and making sense of what we do know.
Precisely. It's about recognizing the limitations of our knowledge without giving in to despair or skepticism. We can still strive to be clear-headed critical thinkers, even if we can never achieve perfect absolute knowledge.
That's actually really empowering. It's like Mill is saying, hey, you've got this amazing brain. Use it. Question your assumptions, test your beliefs, and never stop learning.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of Mill's most enduring passions.
Yeah.
Freedom of thought and expression. He believed that this constant questioning and debating was essential not just for individual growth, but for society as a whole.
I'm starting to see how this all connects. So how does this naturalistic thinker who believes we're shaped by experience and limited by our senses become such a fierce defender of free speech? That seems like a whole other deep dive.
It's all connected. Mill believed that because our knowledge is limited and shaped by our experiences, we need to be open to different perspectives and ideas.
Good evening, London. Allow me first to apologize for this.
The emergency channel!
I do, like many of you, appreciate the comforts of the everyday routine, the security of the familiar, the tranquility and repetition.
Bloody hell.
I enjoy them as much as any bloke. But in the spirit of commemoration,
Who's that, Mum?
whereby those important events of the past, usually associated with someone's death or the end of some awful bloody struggle, are celebrated with a nice holiday, I thought we could mark this November the 5th, a day that is sadly no longer remembered, by taking some time out of our daily lives to sit down and have a little chat. There are, of course, those who do not want us to speak.
Let me think, just let
I
me think.
suspect even now, orders are being shouted into telephones, and men with guns will soon be on their way.
It's Chancellor Sutler.
Damn it!
Why? Because while the truncheon may be used in lieu of conversation, words will always retain their power. Words offer the means to meaning, and for those who will listen, the enunciation of truth. And the truth is, there is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there?
You designed it, sir. You wanted it foolproof. You told me every television in London.
Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and
Cameras.
soliciting your submission.
We need cameras.
How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror. I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of problems which conspired to corrupt your reason and rob you of your common sense. Fear got the best of you, and in your panic you turned to the now High Chancellor Adam Sutler. He promised you order, he promised you peace, and all he demanded in return was your silent, obedient consent.
That's how we refine our understanding and get closer to the truth.
Okay, I get that diversity of thought is important, but Mill went further than most. He even defended the right to express opinions that were just plain wrong. Didn't he famously say something like, if all mankind minus one were of one opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person?
You're remembering correctly. It's a powerful image, right? And Mill had some pretty compelling reasons for taking such a strong stance. First, he argued that we can never be absolutely certain that we have the whole truth. What we believe to be wrong today could turn out to be right tomorrow.
So being open to being wrong, that takes some serious humility. But I can see how it would prevent us from clinging to outdated or inaccurate beliefs.
Exactly. Second, Mill believed that even wrong opinions can contain a grain of truth or a new way of looking at things. By grappling with those wrong ideas, we can strengthen our understanding of the right ones.
I guess it's like that saying, iron sharpens iron. You need that friction to make progress.
That's a great way to put it. And finally, Mill argued that even when we are right, our beliefs can become stale and dogmatic if they're not challenged. Open debate keeps our minds sharp and forces us to justify our beliefs.
It's like that feeling when you haven't ridden a bike in years and you have to relearn how to balance. If we don't exercise our critical thinking muscles, they'll atrophy. So how did Mill's views on free speech play out in his ideas about, actual government and society.
Well, that's where his famous harm principle comes in. It's the idea that individuals should be free to do as they please as long as they don't harm others.
That sounds simple enough on the surface, but I imagine it gets pretty tricky when you start trying to define harm.
Absolutely. And Mill grappled with those complexities. But for him, the harm principle was a cornerstone of a free and just society. It meant defending individual liberty while also recognizing the need to protect individuals from being harmed by others.
So wrapping this all up, we've gone from how our brains work to the importance of free speech, all thanks to John Stuart Mill. It's amazing how these ideas from all the way back then are still so relevant today. I mean, think about the debates we're having N-now-W about online censorship, misinformation, echo chambers. It's like Mill was ahead of his time or something.
He certainly anticipated many of the challenges we face today. I think if Mill could design the ultimate follow-up deep dive for you, he'd want you to consider this. How can we uphold the principles of free speech and open inquiry in a world saturated with information, much of it misleading or outright false?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like Mill is leaving us with a challenge to take his ideas about knowledge, freedom, and individual responsibility and apply them to this brave new world we're living in. Well, that's it for our deep dive into the mind of John Stuart Mill. From the nature of our brains to the foundations of a free society, we've covered a lot of ground. Hopefully this has sparked some new ideas and given you plenty to ponder.
Remember, this is just the beginning of the exploration. Keep those questions coming and keep diving deep.
That music.
Yes. His music.
Who was he?
Who's Edmund Dantes? And who's my father? And my mother? My brother? My friend? Who is you? And me? Who's all of us? No one will ever forget that night and what it meant for this country.